I am Mrs. X, and I'm here to talk about my family's experience. My son identifies as trans. I believed this was from the internet, and I still believe the internet is a massive issue in the world of trans. My son loves to play computer games, spends time online, and I don't think it would surprise anyone if I was to say that there are many groomers, if I'm allowed to use that word, online who, when I was growing up, it might have been an adult with sweeties in the park. That world is gone and now operates online. So I assumed this had come from there, and I had very honest conversations with my son. He was shown information that I won't go into now, which would make him feel that he wasn't himself. When I say himself, I mean that he wasn't male after all. My son is an intelligent, charming, funny, lovely young man, and I need to protect him. That is my role as a mother, and I will do that to the death. So, my son and I had open conversations. He announced his trans identity to my husband and I recognise that he could have chosen not to do that. I am aware of students at universities who are taking cross-sex hormones without their parents' awareness. I'm aware of so many horror stories because the narrative of the authentic self is everywhere in society. The belief nowadays that as a female you have to be feminine to be female, to be male you have to be masculine, which is nonsense. As a girl you can climb trees, play football, do anything that you want to do as a girl. It does not make you a boy, and boys can sensitively read books in the corner. They can be however they want to be. They can cook with their mothers. They are not females because they are gender non-conforming. So when my son announced his trans identity, my husband and I were blown away by confusion and fear. And my mission has been to try and find where this came from. So it was only recently, despite the fact that my son is now settled and happy at university, I recently discovered an email. And the email was about relationship and sex education and PSHE. And RSE, relationship and sex education, comes under PSHE. And this email mentioned 3 days that my son had had in year 9, and this PSHE day covered pornography, healthy relationships, LGBT awareness. I would have seen that email in year 9, thought this was a really positive thing. Pornography is pernicious, unwelcome in the environment of children and adolescents. Healthy relationships, having a very happy marriage. My healthy relationships are the essence of a really good, healthy adulthood. And LGBT awareness, I miss that T. It was very important to me that my child is, who had told me previously has gay friends. It was very important to me that my children understood the importance of being tolerant of diversity. Diversity in its true sense is a good thing. So the RSE and the PSHE lessons, I missed the T. I didn't understand it. And I have discovered very, very recently, several months ago, that an organisation was brought into the school as part of that day. And their teaching materials are very, very disturbing. There is a lady called Claire Page, who I have read court cases in the paper, who is looking for transparency of these lessons within schools. And it is political indoctrination to teach children that their bodies are not necessarily wired to match their brains. So for me to have a conversation with my son, my school-aged son, whereby he said to me that his brain didn't match his body, was one of the most surreal moments of my life. Schizophrenia is known. Sarah Jane Blakemore did research on schizophrenic teenagers. Nobody is diagnosed with schizophrenia in their 40s. And that led her to then stop researching schizophrenia and start researching the teenage brain. To teach children that their bodies do not match their brains, where my son got this idea from is beyond me. There is a book called Sex and Gender, A Contemporary Reader, edited by Alice Sullivan and Selena Todd, which dispels many of the myths. A gentleman called Professor Michael Biggs writes a chapter about puberty blockers. Hannah Barnes has written a book, Time to Think, which is about the unfolding scandal of the Tavistock Clinic. Hannah Barnes's book, she has been shortlisted for the Orwell Science Prize last time and the Bale Gifford Prize. She's an investigative journalist who has worked tirelessly to write an evidenced book about what is happening at the Tavistock Clinic, which has led to Hilary Cass's review. Interim review has been published, and we are awaiting the full review. Hilary Cass's review so far has said that social transitioning is not a neutral act. My son was socially transitioned by school. I will put my hands up and say that we were involved to a degree that the school were very clear with us. My son was 17, and his view overrided our view as parents, despite the fact he was at school. He decided he was trans, we had to fit in. So when my son made his announcement, and we said, thank you for telling us, it very quickly moved on to a new name. And the new name, obviously deeply distressing, and I had a conversation with my son where my husband and I have had several conversations about what masculine and femininity are, and they are, gender is a social construct, period. Sexist stereotypes have no place in a healthy society. And my son was already indoctrinated, so this fell on deaf ears. And so my son asked for a new name, and I had a conversation with my son where I had the conversation with him, and I explained that this was grieving for us. Did he understand this? And he did. He bowed his head and nodded. Who has fed in the idea that who he had been for the first 17 years of his life was now invalid? This was a gender non-conforming child, a child there was no issue with, apart from anxiety, prior to this announcement. our backs are at the wall. The schools are adding significantly on top of the internet, because if the schools are teaching this at ever younger ages and children are starting to question themselves and feel uncomfortable, unsure, no wonder if my son had been taught this in year 9, no wonder he was feeling anxious and couldn't articulate to us why he was feeling anxious. I can't read his mind. That might not be the reason, but it makes me question it now. I would like to have answers. Why was he taught a contested belief? I approached the school to ask them to bring in other people to discuss what he was presented with, because not only are the clubs at school, not only are there PSHD stroke RSE, relationship and sex education lessons, which are not taught by the school, they are taught by external providers who the government sign off, the government funds, and these lessons are written by queer theory activists in universities in conjunction with other people, and they are selling an agenda which is deeply disturbing. We were recommended mermaids after the announcement. The teacher recommended mermaids. Mermaids was set up by Susie Green, a mother who took her son to Thailand to be castrated, age 16, and the law has been changed in Thailand as a result of those actions. Mermaids still operates despite being investigated by the Charity Commission. Fortunately for me, I had read an article I looked everywhere for information, literally everywhere, from very organisations that I would not align with, Gears, and many more. And because finding your feet in this world is really hard, I actually learned to trust no one very early on. And so the lessons, so we have the clubs, we have the lessons, and then we have the teacher. So the teacher recommended mermaids to us. The teacher also told us that it would be all right because she had experience of this previously. I then learnt later on that the teachers who were brought in, one teacher was asked to be brought in as my son's ally. Even the word ally is activist language. So I learnt that the teacher who was my son's ally, and I believe more, were trained by gendered intelligence. So I went on gendered intelligence training myself, where I was taught non-stop to respect people's pronouns. Respect is a big word in the trans community, how we have to respect their wishes, we have to respect their feelings. And me being told to call my son she or her is compelled speech. And I will go to prison for that, because I will never call my son my daughter, and I will never call my son she, her. I will call my son, possibly in the future, a name that is not his birth name, because it's his life. But I will not deny the reality that my son was born biologically male, no matter what he does to his body. And the reason I can sit here in a position of strength is because as my son's mother, I will love him until the day I die. No matter what he does to his body. And I am not, now he is an adult, I am not in control of that, sadly. Even though his brain is not mature, even though cross-sex hormones will damage his brain. Sally Baxendale is a researcher who has looked at the cognitive impact but I'm meant to celebrate my son's authentic self. Authentic self, another corruption of language. I would have thought authentic self is teaching children to be happy who they are. Diversity is not what it appears. Language has been corrupted, compelled speech is coming in, and I would highly recommend a book. It is called The Psychology of Totalitarianism. And the world is becoming a darker place. My son's university have told me that students are allowed time off for surgeries. And that doesn't feel like a very healthy way to live a life, because these surgeries are irreversible. A girl cannot regrow her breasts, and a boy cannot regrow a penis. These surgeries are barbaric, and I recognise that some people will be very happy with their surgeries in later life. The impact on families is not discussed. Jan Morris is often, and recently by a peer to me, is reeled out as the good trans person. But I have no interest as the mother of a son in what any middle-aged man, what his opinion is, quite frankly, in relation to my family. My son is a vulnerable boy who has been politically indoctrinated by the school, been fed affirmation online, been cheerled to believe that when he becomes his authentic self, he will feel euphoria. Euphoria is the language. Do detransitioners talk about euphoria? Yes, on videos of what drove them to this. If you look at the Gay Men's Network website, there is a detransitioner who talks eloquently about this. But there is no going back. So how these surgeries can be allowed on young bodies is beyond me. As I said before, what happens to people who are older than 25, I would actually argue 30, older than 30. I mean, where is the line? That is not for me to decide. That is society's decision where to decide where to draw the line on these surgeries. But I would like to point out one thing, is that I heard a well-known person ask for a petition to be signed for cancer care on the NHS. Apparently since 2020, something like 2,250, a very large amount of people are on the waiting list for cancer treatments. So as a society, we have to decide where that money goes. It's not a never-ending pot. So gender-affirming care of minors and adolescents and older people, is that a priority for the NHS? That's not my decision. It is a decision that the government and society need to take. And I hope with all my heart that Dr. Hilary Cass's final review will take, it is only up to 18, that it will consider 18 to 25-year-olds. And in the case of Richie Herron and other people who were transitioned later in life, I have a friend who wrote to me when my children were toddlers. His older child, was literally going in for surgery the week that he wrote me this letter. I've no idea what happened. My friend died. I've no idea what happened to this person, but there are no follow-up studies, and detransitioners are silenced. So I hope in Dr. Hilary Cass's review, which will be coming out soon, that these people are helped. Yes, so these providers went in, and then the teachers were trained by gendered intelligence. I wrote to the school to ask them to bring in Transgender Trend, for example, who Stephanie from that organisation has been awarded, I can't remember, it's the OBE, for her work for children's services. Kira Bell, the court case with Kira Bell, demonstrates that people experience regret, and there will be more and more court cases as the years progress. And I wrote to the school to ask them to bring in an alternative viewpoint, because I felt that if gendered intelligence had spoken to the teachers, and the RSE PSHE lessons had taught this contested belief, it was important to hear the other side. There are two sides to a debate. I will be classed by some recording this as a transphobe. I'm no transphobe. I actually have no issue with anyone in life. I would just like people to leave my children alone. And this movement, having done lots of research, has very dark forces behind it. I would ask parents to think carefully about the plus on the end of LGBT, what that plus actually means. It should not be the responsibility of the parent to do this. It should not be the responsibility of the parents. The parents should. I was not aware of the significance of the T at the end of the LGBT Awareness Day because I was too busy being a mum at home and baking the bread, doing all the good things to try and make my family happy and harmonious. The role of the state should be to protect children, and the guidance has failed significantly. And Gillian Keegan, as the Education Minister, should listen to parents like me, and so should MPs. My MP has refused to meet with me despite me explaining in detail what has happened to my child. That's not right in a democracy. I should be heard. Schools should not be teaching this as the only way, the only reality, because my son is an intelligent young man. My other child knows this is not for her, and she believes in biological reality, and I'm very relieved about that, because I feel I have lost one child to the gender cult, and I hope for me, it's like the child catcher arrived and my child has gone off in the cage at the back of the van, and my child is still out there, but I am hunting for my child, and I'm not in control of whether I will, I'm not in control of that, and that's deeply distressing as a parent going to bed every night. I think gender identity ideology is attractive for young people because we all feel, because adolescence is a challenging time. Also, if you're neurodiverse and you don't fit into, you're not the popular child at school, you always feel you don't fit, that's really hard. So this gives you a solution. This gives you a solution that if you transition, then you will be happy. This cloak of to be a different person, that is not a healthy model to teach a child, that to change your body is the way to become happy. How can that in a civilized society be considered a solution? My belief is that schools shouldn't teach it at all. But if they do teach it, it would be that they have to present an alternative view, that biological reality exists. Science lessons are taught in school, yet so is gender identity ideology. It's got no place in schools. Hilary Cass has already said in the interim review that social transitioning is not a neutral act. How this is allowed in school, taking the authority away from parents, is beyond me. And there will be some parents who disagree with me radically. There will be some parents who believe that their child is happier in their authentic self. My son tells me he is happier now. Of course, whether that will be forever is questionable. My relationship with my son, once he finished school, I had a conversation, really quick conversation actually, where I said that actually we weren't going to be going along with this anymore because we didn't believe in it, and actually we all mattered in our family, all of us, and this was very, very destructive to all of us. And my other child did never agreed to call my son his newfound name. Their future will be dictated by both of them, whether they're in each other's lives. I know that my husband and I want to have a relationship in the future with both of our children. And sadly, that might mean on different terms with each of them, which is a really harrowing prospect. But there's only one reality. The irony of me saying those words, there's only one reality. There is only one reality. And my children have conflicting views. And my husband and I will keep my son in our lives no matter what. We will never abandon him. And we have said this repeatedly, which quite often, gets an exasperated response because he's a teenager. So obviously we're the boring old fuddy-duddies who haven't got an idea, because youth always thinks, every youth thinks that it has the answers and the solutions to the future. So how is my relationship with my son now? As good as it can be, but that is very, very precarious. And I know many families who are estranged, and the horror stories are horrendous. And one of the reasons for doing this video is to get parent voices heard, because parent voices are not heard. I think it's important for parents to be involved or to be heard by government. I think ultimately this should not be in schools, because schools are meant to be a place to educate children. So to learn how to do maths, to learn how to read a book and interpret the book. It should be about a level of education. It is not a social justice agenda of how to fix the problems of the world and how to be your authentic self. This is not a place, this stuff should not be in schools, period. And it is the Department of Education's responsibility to ensure this is taken out. So now parents are finding their feet, fighting back. Obviously, parents can speak to their children's schools to make the schools aware of what's going on. Speak to the Department of Education, their MPs. You may be silenced like me and not be able to see your MP. The Bad Law Project, who are behind this, are looking to raise the voices of parents, and I'm grateful for that. And so if there's any parent out there who needs help and support, I've mentioned parent support groups, I've mentioned books, and I have mentioned the Bad Law Project. And finally, I'd like to say thank you to everybody who is trying to make a difference to the lives of children in this country.